This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, everyone. Quick shout out here at the top of the show. I just wanted to acknowledge it's been an incredibly busy news weekend. You've got President Trump rolling out tariffs against Canada and Mexico and China. There's also some reporting about colleagues of Elon Musk meddling in the internal workings of the government's financial systems. So before we get on with the show, just a quick reminder that you can call us and tell us what you're seeing as all this stuff happens. The way to do it is to leave us a voicemail. The number is 646-582-0091. That's 646-582-0091. All right, on with the show. Olivia Stellic is an Army Ranger, a West Point graduate. And among other things, that means her closet is stuffed with uniforms.
I have so many uniforms, actually.
For a long time, Olivia served in what's called the Old Guard. That is the ceremonial unit you see at the White House and the Pentagon. She got really good at marching while she was there, carrying a bayonet.
You know, it's the only place I think I've ever been where the metric for success was perfection. Anything less than that was not good enough.
How do you maintain that? I imagine it's in presentation, right? Like you always have one of those lint rollers on you.
Yes, the number of lint rollers. Although actually the secret is that you don't get a lint roller. You get a giant roll of 3-inch masking tape because it lasts way longer and it's way cheaper. So that's the secret, is that when you use that much masking tape to take lint off your uniform every day, that's how you have to buy it in bulk.
These days, Olivia is part of the 101st Airborne Division. She works as a physical therapist at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Her uniform here looks different.
My division is a division that could deploy at a moment's notice. And that is part of daily life in our unit, is readiness. And so my go-to-war bags are packed and they are at work with my body armor and everything that I need should the nation call on me to go to war.
But along with her body armor and dress blues, for a lot of years, Olivia wore an entirely different kind of uniform. You could call it more of a costume, because Olivia's trans. And until a decade ago, there just wasn't a way for her to live openly and also serve her country.
I think I first really got the words around maybe 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, and then didn't end up coming out until, I came out to my boss in the fall of 2016.
So you spent 5 or 6 years. Wow, that's a long time.
It is.
Olivia came out because Barack Obama had signaled it was okay for people like her to serve. A year later, Donald Trump tried to reverse Obama's decision with a surprise tweet. But the Department of Defense found ways to retain trans officers. Now that Trump's back in office, he's leaving a lot less up to chance. His new executive order about gender ideology in the military is called Prioritizing Military Excellence and Readiness. The language in this order is so striking to me. I'm just going to read some of it to you because I struggled with it. It reads, consistent with the military mission and longstanding DoD policy, expressing a false, quote unquote, gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. Adoption of a gender identity inconsistent with an individual's sex conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle. I am not trans, but I find this language insulting. Do you?
You know, it just makes me think about the folks I know who, as we speak, as you and I have this conversation, are deployed all around the world. Some of them in combat zones in harm's way. They're on ships, they're pilots, they're medical providers taking care of their patients. They're doing our cyber war. And they're showing up every single day doing great work at the top of their game because they all raised their right hand and said, I swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, no matter what, to whatever end, even if that be the end of my life, right?
I hear you refusing to be insulted by this language, which I think is quite honorable. But is that hard for you?
Nobody can take me away from myself.
If you were presented with a choice of you can stay in military service, but you'd need to live as a man, live differently, how would you respond?
I think I'd say that right now I'm just focused on doing my job. The hypotheticals and the what ifs are, I don't have the time to worry about that or focus on that.
I imagine it's hard as a military person through and through to consider disregarding orders. It's not what you do.
That's true.
Kind of get the sense you'd show up to work and be you and see what happened.
I just am me. There isn't anyone else.
Today on the show, Donald Trump has taken aim at trans people in the military and everywhere else. Now that his rhetoric is becoming policy, what's the cost? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Over the last few years, Olivia's had to find a way to get comfortable with being a trans person in a space that doesn't seem from the outside to be especially open to trans people. Like I mentioned at the top, Donald Trump banned transgender troops from serving in the military, the first time he was in office, too. Back then, the decision kind of came out of nowhere.
It was a surprise to everyone. I actually didn't even know that it happened. I came into work one morning and my first patient said, I don't care what anybody says. I want you to be my physical therapist. And I was really kind of caught off guard.
Did you even know what they meant?
No, I had no idea. I just was like, okay, I love that. Thanks. And so at some point later that day, my sister called and she was like, are you okay? And I was at work and I just was like, I'll call you back. But yes, I'm fine. Didn't know. And eventually, she got in touch with me and And I found out, and then I went back to patient care, right? Like I learned that this thing had happened, and I still had patients scheduled that day, and I saw my patients that day. And the next day I saw my patients that day too.
Did it end up changing anything about your work?
It didn't change anything about my work. The way the policy played out was that I was able to continue to be myself at work. And no, it didn't change. There was never a drop in my care. Like I was at work that day, and the next day, and the next day, and the day after that, and so on and so forth. And then I volunteered to go to Afghanistan.
This time around, it seems like Donald Trump is approaching managing trans people in the military very differently. He released an executive order. It's called Prioritizing Military Excellence and Readiness. What did you think of that?
Well, here's the thing. There's this line in the Ranger Creed that says, "Gallantly will I show the world that I am a specially selected and well-trained soldier." And I think that's where my head is, that I have been through every possible school and training course that the Army could possibly want me to go through. I have deployed to the remotest, furthest corners of Afghanistan. I've spent time in Lebanon and Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. I've traveled and taken care of thousands of patients in all of these deployed locations. And I show up every day building the readiness of my division and the 17,000 soldiers in this division. And so I think that my service is quite literally an example of excellence and readiness.
So according to this executive order, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has a couple months to formulate new rules about who can serve and how. Last time around, when Trump did something similar, eventually the rule was people who had transitioned in service, were already in service, there would be no status change for them. Do you think that will be different this time?
I try not to speculate about policy. It happens at such a high level compared to where I work, that really I'm focused on my team and what I can do today to make them better. Because between now and whenever any policy happens, my division has the United States business to carry out, right? We have operational deployments. We have training. We have all of these things that are real and happening every day. And I'm an integral part of that. And so that's where my head is I'm focused on that.
I'm trying to imagine how it would reverberate through a unit like yours. If suddenly, for instance, they were ordered, they need to address someone like you by he, him pronouns. Use your birth name.
Somebody asked me the other day if I had any concerns about the climate in my unit. And I said, I don't. I know my team. I trust my team. My team cares about me. And we don't single people out, right? We don't single people out for anything. We care about your performance, and I perform at the top of my game. We care about your character, and I would say that I have impeccable character. I think I have every confidence and no doubt in the fact that my leadership and my peers are going to continue to treat me with dignity and respect in accordance with the Army values.
You sound so optimistic to me, because what you're saying is in direct opposition to what the Secretary of Defense has said under oath in front of Congress.
I'm an optimistic human being. I think that I have an unshakable belief that that people are good and that people care for each other. I think it's really easy for narratives to happen at this high level, but at the ground, when you're on a forward operating base in Afghanistan, nobody cares what you look like. Nobody cares what pronouns you use. Nobody cares where you grew up or what religion you are. Nobody cares about any of that because it doesn't matter at war. When your life is on the line, when somebody else's life is on the line, when being at 75% of your capacity means risking everybody else's life, having me show up and get you back to 100% because that's what I do, that's the only thing that matters.
You don't have to serve in the military anymore, right? Like, you're a medical professional. Do you ever think about retiring?
I mean, one day I'll retire, but I'm not ready. I love the Army. I tell people all the time that, I like being a physical therapist. I really like being a physical therapist, and I'm really good at it. But I'm especially good, and I especially like being an Army physical therapist because I spent time in the operational Army as an infantry officer. I earned my Ranger tab. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've rappelled out of helicopters. I've done the long ruck marches. I've carried the heavy weight. I've slept in the rain. You name it, I've done it. I know what a soldier's life is like. And so when I give them medical advice, it's from a place of knowing. I couldn't be better for my job. The Army has spent millions and millions of dollars to make me who I am, to have all the experiences and qualifications to be a board certified specialist in orthopedic physical therapy, to have done all of the Army schools. I'm exactly what the Army needs in this role that I'm in.
How hard are you prepared to fight to stay?
I told somebody this yesterday, and I think it holds true and maybe is the truest thing, that the end of the Ranger Creed says, readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. I'm not going anywhere.
No matter what.
No matter what. I have soldiers to take care of. I have soldiers that are depending on me, that rely on me. I will be here.
I get the sense that you're pretty confident that, if you and Pete Hegseth were in the same room, you could, do a push-up contest and work it out.
I would love to have that conversation. Absolutely.
After the break, a look at all the other executive orders targeting trans people.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
The ban on transgender troops is just one of an array of gender-related executive orders that President Trump has announced during his first weeks in office. These orders include one that would ban gender-affirming care for people under 19, an order that would require prison inmates to be housed according to their sex at birth, a ban on allowing X gender markers on passports, and a policy that the federal government will only recognize two genders based on biological markers. So I called up Kate Sosin, a reporter at the 19th, and asked them to explain how this flood of orders could play out.
One of the hallmarks of a lot of these orders is that they are not scientifically accurate and they fly in the face of a lot of pre-existing law.
It might be useful to just lay out how quickly things have changed for trans people and how much whiplash this is.
Sometimes I like to think about this moment that I had 20 years ago sitting in a church basement for Trans Day of Remembrance and thinking that trans people, that no one even knows what a trans person looks like or who a trans person is, and thinking like, I'll never see in my lifetime trans people on TV or anything. And now trans people are on the news every single day. And to me, it's significant and it's beautiful, even if it's resulting in this backlash. Trans people have come really, really far, and I think we can't lose sight of that. And there's a movement against that visibility.
Yeah.
In the last 4 years, it's gotten really hard in terms of policy, but in terms of community and in terms of visibility, trans people are more visible than they've ever been.
Yeah. I think you pointed out to my producer that it was only 2020 when, for instance, trans people got the right to have an X marker instead of a male or female on their passport. And to me, it just shows how quickly things have changed really rapidly.
Yeah, it was actually 2021, I think, was the first X-gender marker issued. And that win happened during the Biden administration. It took years of suing. So yes, that is rather significant. And I like to point to this moment 10 years ago when the White House is lit up in rainbow colors and marriage equality is the law of the land. And it feels like, oh, the country has changed for LGBTQ plus people, and leaders of other civil rights movements look around and they're like, how did you all do it so fast? And we're like, we don't know. It's amazing. And now we look and things feel so markedly different 10 years later. And the hard-won rights that were gained just 10 years ago are eroding before our very eyes.
You mentioned how these orders, many of them are straight up illegal. I want to lay out how that's true for one of these orders in particular. Like, for instance, there's an order about how inmates should be housed in the United States. They should be housed by their biological sex as born. So this kind of order is illegal because there's actually a 2009 law called the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And that was passed by Congress. And the executive cannot overrule Congress, right?
Yeah, this is the case with so many of these executive orders, right? It's just like Congress, who? The Prison Rape Elimination Act, specifically, it says you can't just house trans people according to their sex assigned at birth. You have to take into account where they feel like they will be safest and house them on a case-by-case basis. For the record, this has never played out the way that it was intended to. So in 2020, I did an investigation with NBC and found that of 5,000 trans people being housed in state prisons, 15 were housed according to their actual lived genders. So
wow.
For the most part, states have not followed PREA. That said, it is still a federal law. It is not legal.
And on Sunday, a trans woman in prison sued the Trump administration after being told she would be moved to a men's facility, right?
That's correct, yes. We relitigate this issue over and over again as if it is not settled law. And it really is, and it has been.
I do think it's important to clarify that agencies and hospitals and schools, all of these places will have important choices to make in the coming days and weeks. Like, for instance, one of these executive orders, it specifically talks about what government healthcare will pay for, and tries to say government healthcare will not pay for trans healthcare. And that's something that I think will force hospitals and individuals into making decisions, because it's going to go to the bottom line for these places, right?
Yes. And I think you're raising the most critical point, which is that a lot of gender clinics, a lot of hospitals, a lot of care providers feel like they need to make a decision instantaneously and on their own. And these orders, whether by intent or design, or sending a message that everybody needs to sort of comply and get on board. What we need in this moment is real leadership from the institutions that were set up to provide guidance and protection. So the American Medical Association, we've reached out and asked them, what is the guidance? The American Psychological Association. These are the types of organizations that need to come out and give guidance to hospitals, to clinics, to individual doctors about, one, what they should be doing, how they should be interpreting this, and two, what are the resources and protections they're going to be providing to some of these healthcare providers, because I think that's where we're going to see the resistance and the response and sort of the clear-headed planning.
Yeah. It depends on individual choices. Like, as we began our conversation here, I was beginning to notice how just the atmosphere of blame was trickling down to individuals. Like, we're talking right after this horrific plane crash in Washington, D.C. Afterwards, Donald Trump held a press conference where he blamed, quote unquote, DEI for the crash. And he said it was common sense that DEI would be to blame.
Yeah.
Which was strange. And then immediately after that, this rumor started online that somehow a trans service member had been piloting the helicopter that crashed. And it was attached to her name and her picture. And she had to come out with a video being like, hey, here I am, still very much alive, not piloting a helicopter that downed a plane over the Potomac. It's really disturbing.
I never thought I would live through a time like this. I just didn't. It just does not feel possible that this is the moment that we're in. I feel like I keep reviewing like my career of reporting and looking for signposts and moments that lead us here, and it's really hard to make sense of. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way.
Do you think Democrats are understanding the risk of this moment? How do you feel they're working as an opposition party here?
Not very well. I don't know if Democrats truly, and I don't want to make a blanket statement about Democrats, but the Democratic Party has not stood up for trans lives and transhumanity in a way that is truly like reflective of the serious emergency that trans people are facing. It is existential. And, going back as far as Biden, who a lot of people, I think, fairly argue was the most LGBTQ plus friendly president that we've had. His response to a lot of this was to simply say, trans kids, we have your backs. But that is not enough in a moment like this when trans kids are being stripped of their health care, their ability to access bathrooms, their right to participate in school activities, when they're facing violence at the levels that they have been, when they're being demonized in public life. Adults in the room, and at this point, Democrats, need to be ferociously defending these kids. And I don't know that we've seen it.
Do you think the executive orders will change things in that they're so clearly overbroad that, I don't know, it becomes clear like compromise isn't something that's happening right now?
I worry that the executive orders are chipping away at the climate of support for trans people. One of the issues that trans people have is that so few of us know trans people or are familiar with trans people. So, when we talk about support for LGBTQ plus people, most of us at least have an LGBTQ plus family member, coworker, or a barista at least, for trans people, a lot fewer of us know and love a trans person. And that means that we feel more expendable to the American public And so if everyone is under attack, it is a lot easier to prioritize somebody else than a trans person. I don't think that this country hates trans people. I really don't. I think that this country doesn't know trans people and can't wrap their mind around this particular issue because we haven't had an opportunity to sit down sort of clear-headed and get to know trans folks. And I think if we did, like, we recognize that trans people are people. But in a moment of chaos like this, we don't stand a chance of doing that.
Kate, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Kate Sosin is an LGBTQ plus beat reporter at the 19th. And earlier in the show, you heard from Major Olivia Stellic, the director of holistic health and fitness for the 101st Airborne Division. And that is our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.